what is your hope for the future for your grandchildren?
I think the challenges are great, but I think the opportunities are also great. I think the advantage my grandchildren have are so far superior to what I had. It's unbelievable. I think when you come up in a family that your grandparents had advanced degrees, that had the resources to assist you in whatever career in school you want to, not only having the advantage of educated parents and grandparents who can tell you in no uncertain terms what it takes in terms of work, persistence, and dedication to success, but can also be examples. So I really want to say to my grandkids, they can be anything they want to be if they put their mind to it. Okay, looking back at my grandparents, I was fortunate enough, one of the few members of my family as a kid, to spend summers with both my maternal grandmother and my paternal grandmother. My paternal grandmother, my dad's mother, name was Vannie Bacon. Her maiden name was Irvin. I knew of two brothers she had. They were both twins. Their names were Paul and Silas. I never met them. I met some of their kids. They also lived in Hopkinsville. The ages of how she ranked in the family I never really knew. But my grandmother Vannie had three children. My father, Cuttie Bacon Jr., a daughter, O'Leary Bacon, that my youngest sister's named after, and Artie Bacon. I think Artie was the oldest. O'Leary was middle child. My father, Cuttie Bacon Jr., was the baby. We called her affectionately Granny because it was so close to Vannie. Everybody referred to her as Granny. Granny was a tall woman, about 5'9", very stately, with real straight gray hair. She was a very demanding lady, very loving lady, but very strict. The first summer I stayed with her for about a month, I recall the first conversation was, "I'm your granny. I love you an awful lot. You will be here for a while with me. And these are the rules of the house. When I eat, you eat. When I sleep, you sleep. When I work, you work. Any questions about that?" She never gave you the time to ask any questions at all, and it appeared that she did not want you to question any of her directions. So about 6 o'clock every morning, she would call me. She would always have Maxwell House coffee ready. She would give me a half cup of milk, half cup of coffee, and I would have coffee and eggs and bacon and homemade biscuits. I always liked it at her house because she fed you always more than you wanted to eat. There seemed to be an abundance of food all the time, and she got a great kick out of watching her grandson eat. After breakfast, generally, we would proceed to a garden, which was about a quarter of an acre. And from about 7 in the morning until the sun got too hot to be out there, we pulled weeds, we tilled the soil, and helped her garden. She cooked. She raised most of her vegetables. The ones she had left that she didn't eat, she canned the old-fashioned way for the winter. She was an exceptionally good cook, a great housekeeper. And the interesting thing about she lived in the rural area of Kentucky, a city called Gracie, about 10 miles west of Hopkinsville, population probably 1,500. The interesting thing about her, she cooked extremely well. She was an impeccable person. She kept an impeccable house. The interesting thing about the house was it had no running water, no electricity, and no indoor sewage. So she had an outhouse that you used for a restroom, and she used a kerosene lamps and candles for light at night. And for water, they had a city well that we walked at least a half mile to twice a day to get well water. For her washing water and work water, she had a sprout that came out of the gutter that filled up a big barrel in the backyard. And when she needed to wash clothing or mop the floor, we used that water. And we also used that water to bathe in. She had a large tin tub that she set in the kitchen. And my job was to fill about a 3-gallon bucket up and heat it on the coal and wood stove hot enough to bathe in. Pour that in the water and bathe. She had a strict rule in the house. You must have a bath every Saturday night before going to church on Sunday. During the week it was negotiable because many times water was scarce, so you had the only requirement before you went to bed was to be certain to wash your face and hands. You never did mention any other part of the body, but before going to bed every night I was instructed, make certain you wash your face and hands. Of her children, my dad had moved then. Our family lived in Louisville. Her daughter O'Leary lived in Indianapolis, and her oldest daughter Artie lived with her total life. She never lived with anybody else until my grandmother died. Artie worked in a laundry at the Fort Campbell military base in Hopkinsville. Lived with my grandmother, and took care of her. My grandmother made a transition, died, I think sometimes in around 68 or 69, and she was in her 90s when she died. She was a very healthy woman. I don't think she had long-term illness at all. I don't remember her ever having dementia. She was a very alert person, highly respected person in the neighborhood, and was known as a no-nonsense person. People did not gossip with her. They did not hang around her place. And she was known not to be a terribly friendly person, but a very nice, rigid lady.
Where was she born? Was she born in Kentucky?
She was born in Western Kentucky. I think she was born there's a little area about 5 miles from Grayson called Cerulean Springs. I think I recall her saying she was born on a farm in Cerulean Springs. Her husband, Cuttie Sr., Cuttie William Bacon Sr., I never met. He was deceased when I was born. The stories I heard about him was he was a man about 6'2". They described him as tall, dark, and handsome, and a man with a lot of charisma. He was a soft-spoken man, did farming most of his life, and later on in life, after the farms failed, he went to work on the railroad. According to his death certificate, he died of colon cancer. According to my father, he died when my father was 13 years old. At that time, there was no money coming into the household, so my father dropped out of school, went to work as a water boy, as a rock quarry, and helped support his mother and his 2 sisters until they were grown.
So he was Cuttie the second.
He was Cuttie Jr.
He was Cuttie Jr.
Yeah.
And your grandfather was Cuttie the first.
Cuttie Senior.
Senior. Cuttie
Yeah.
Senior, then Cuttie Jr. You're Cuttie the third.
I'm the third. My son was Cuttie the fourth.
Okay.
They tried to trace the name back. Some folks say that it's very popular in Jamaica, and somehow it was his parents were from Jamaica. I bumped into a guy from Ghana, and I found out the firstborn son in a region not far from Accra is always named Cuttie. I did go to Ghana and research it. I bumped into a lot of Cutties, but I couldn't exactly make the connection between Cuttie and Cuttie, but we think my great-grandmother was trying to put together Cuttie for my grandfather, and he was the firstborn son, and so was my father, the firstborn son in his family, and I was the firstborn son in my family. So we think we carry on the tradition, but a tradition that we cannot verify.